What's up guys, Alex here with a new tutorial, and today we're going to be learning how to create the vertigo effect. Now, as you saw in the video example, the vertigo effect kind of plays with the perception of your eyes. The best way I can describe this is that the main subject of the footage is staying in place relatively the same scale, while the foreground or the background objects tends to kind of warp or distort while you're zooming in on the subject. So I tried to find a real life footage of where I can practice this effect on, but I wasn't able to record any of that, so I decided to use Call of Duty cinematics. So if you want to use this specific example, I put a link down in the description below. It's a MediaFire link so that you can have the same example to practice on creating the vertigo effect on. So let's go ahead and get started. So I'm going to go ahead and put the cinematic onto the timeline. And as you can see, when you play back the cinematic, you're going to notice that the cinematic is already animated so that the camera is zooming in on any particular subject, or it's zooming in general. So that's what we need. It won't work if you have a stationary footage where it's just stationary and it's not zooming in or zooming out or anything like that. So when you're doing this effect, you always want to make sure that you have a camera that's always zooming in on a general area. So with the vertigo effect, it doesn't really last or make or look really good if you have the vertigo effects, making the vertigo effects like 4 or 5 seconds long. It only works up to about 3 seconds at the least, and then the max amount of seconds you can probably use the vertigo effect is probably around 5 or 4 seconds. So you never want to go above 4 or 5 seconds. Otherwise you'll ruin the effect. So what we need to do is set a marker point where we want the or how long we want the effect to last. So I'm gonna go ahead and play this through, and I'm gonna find a good part around between 3 or 4 seconds, so about 3 minutes or 3 seconds and 20 frames in. So I'm gonna go ahead and set a marker. So once you set a marker, you have a point indicating how long the effect is. And the next step, we're going to go into the crop and event pan crop option, and we're going to go ahead and make sure that sync cursor is checked, and we're going to go ahead and click on our marker just to make sure it's there. And once you see your cursor around the marker on the video effects or video event FX timeline, you're going to go ahead and create a keyframe. But we're not going to change anything with this keyframe. What we're going to do is take a step back and go to the very first keyframe that's already there by default. And since the camera is already moving, we don't need to zoom in any further. What we need to do is zoom in at the very first keyframe, so that to put it at the least that the actually to explain this very generally, the camera is zooming in and at the same time it's zooming out, because you're zooming in at the very start, and then when you get to the second keyframe it's zooming out, but in the footage it's doing the exact opposite. And that's how the vertigo effect is created. So I'm gonna go ahead and restore this first keyframe back to its default settings. And what you have to do in order to be careful with creating this effect is that if you zoom in too much at the very start, you're going to create a lot of pixel distortion, or the effect will kind of I don't know how to explain this. The effect isn't going to look well if you zoom in too much. So you want to make sure that you kind of take into consideration how much the in-game camera is in the footage is zoomed. And as you can see, it's very moderate. It's not too drastic. So I'm gonna go ahead and zoom in on the very first keyframe until it looks something like this. So on the very first keyframe, I'm going to zoom in until it looks very similar to the point where I get to the second keyframe. So that looks good. And once you're that, you're basically done. So let's go ahead and preview this. Actually, let me set the quality down a little bit. And that's how you do the vertigo effect. And as you can see, the vertigo effect occurs for a little while, and then it kind of stutters towards the end. That's totally fine. You can adjust the keyframes. You can include more keyframes if you want, but generally all you need is 2 keyframes in order to make this effect work. And that's the end of this tutorial. I hope you guys like it. And if you have any questions about this effect, please ask them in the comments down below. And I will see you guys next time.